No, I'm not letting him do it.
Okay.
Does anyone else have a bill introduction? Representative Epley.
Well, I guess, thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll go next, I guess. I do have three bills to read in for your consideration. The first is 23 RS 0706 for defining non-covered services for dental benefits. Number two,
Who's that on the behalf of?
Kansas Dental Association.
Thank you.
Next is 23 RS 0558, authorizing pharmacy technicians to administer vaccinations down to age 12.
Is that it? And
That's
that's
it.
on the
That's
behalf?
that's on behalf of the Kansas Pharmacists Association.
Okay.
And next is 23 RS 0296. Similar to another bill we have, it's the patient's right to visitation at the time of death. And that is sponsored and offered by Representative Ressman and Representative Epley.
Okay, is there any objection to any of those bill introductions? Seeing none, next, so accepted. Representative Epley, it was your day to get picked,
Ellis.
or Ellis, it's your day to get picked on. I don't even know your name anymore.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's on behalf of Leading Age Kansas.
Can you get closer to your mic, please?
Will do. 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10. Got me down. Okay. RS 0707, Leading Age Kansas on behalf of, and it's relating to Kansas Department of Aging and Disability, providing for regulation of supplemental nursing agencies and creating a supplemental nursing services agency regulations.
Is that it? All right, any objections? Seeing none, so accepted. Representative Reese.
This is on behalf of the professional counselors, RS 0371, an act concerning the behavioral sciences relating to professional counselors, enacting the counseling compact to provide interstate practice privileges.
Is that it?
That's it.
Any objection? Seeing none, so accepted. Any other bill introductions? And for our new members, you might notice we kind of go through that rather quickly because I've yet to see a committee not allow a bill to be introduced. So the only time that we might do that if it was a bill that, let's say it dealt with firefighters, then I would probably deny that one there and ask it to be introduced to the proper committee. So otherwise, it's just kind of a formal format for us to go through. So seeing no more bill introductions, committee, now we're back on to our topic for the day. And today, folks, we have the University of Kansas Cancer Center, Fred Logan, Chair of the Masonic Cancer Alliance Partners Advisory Board. Welcome to committee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Fred Logan, and I am the chair of the Masonic Cancer Alliance Partners Advisory Board. And I'm grateful to have this opportunity to submit testimony to you on the University of Kansas Cancer Center's successful effort to achieve National Cancer Institute Comprehensive Cancer Center designation. And I want to begin my testimony with this. We are grateful, and the people of Kansas are grateful for the support that the legislature provided to the Cancer Center in its effort to win that designation. Some of our region's most outstanding healthcare institutions played critically important roles in the effort to achieve Comprehensive Cancer Center designation. Those institutions are members of the Masonic Cancer Alliance Partners Advisory Board, Children's Mercy Hospital, Stowers Institute for Medical Research, University of Kansas Medical Center, Kansas State University Johnson Cancer Research Center, the University of Kansas Health System, and University Health. We do not yet fully comprehend the impact that comprehensive designation will have for our state. But I will say this. It is my view that the University of Kansas Cancer Center's successful effort to win Comprehensive Cancer Center designation from the National Cancer Institute is the most significant achievement in public health in Kansas in the last 50 years. the benefits to public health in our state will be enormous. There will be advances in cancer care and public health that would not have been possible without the KU Cancer Center efforts. Almost 3 years ago to this day, Dr. Roy Jensen, the Vice Chancellor and Director of the Cancer Center, and I submitted testimony to the legislature. The legislature had under consideration at that time an appropriation of $5 million to the Cancer Center for establishment of a cancer research and public information trust fund. Here's a brief excerpt of what I said in the written testimony that I submitted. Achievement of Comprehensive Cancer Center designation would be a landmark achievement and an important step forward in advancing public health in our state. I advised the legislature that the appropriation would be used to enhance cancer education and outreach programs for Kansans, and that would have a lasting, beneficial impact on the lives of all Kansans. I pointed out that the economic impact of winning that designation would be significant. And then I said this: the economic impact is important, but the advance of public health in our state is of paramount importance. With the passage of this legislation, the legislature would take a major step forward in the effort to win National Cancer Institute Comprehensive Cancer Center designation. That testimony proved to be correct. NCI representatives remarked on that legislative support when they reviewed the Cancer Center's application for comprehensive designation. And this past fall, the NCI awarded Comprehensive Cancer Center designation to the University of Kansas Cancer Center. This is an enormous benefit to our state. And it is important, I think, to say this. This benefit will stretch across Kansas. There will be research and treatment benefits not only in the urban areas of our state, but in the rural areas and small towns of Kansas. National Cancer Institute representatives made note in their site visit that the Cancer Center serves those diverse areas of our state. The Comprehensive Cancer Center designation will, in my view, make the Cancer Center a national leader in serving people in urban and rural areas and in small town communities. As chair of the Midwest Cancer Alliance Partners Advisory Board, I thank the legislature and this committee for its support in 2020 for the $5 million appropriation for the University of Kansas Cancer Center. Kansans will reap the benefits of having a comprehensive cancer center in Kansas for many years to come. And I thank you, and I stand for any questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll take and hear from Dr. Jensen, and then we'll take questions.
We're going to hear from Dr. Godwin.
Oh,
I'll let
Godwin.
Dr. Godwin
Excuse me.
introduce himself.
So what happens when my bifocals aren't aligning correctly, or trifocals, I should say?
So
Welcome
Gabriel's
to
going to
committee.
put up, I actually was asked to kind of give really kind of an update on the Cancer Center, but I also wanted to do a little bit of history so people understand who haven't been part of this process. And so Gabriel's going to put up some slides that I put together, and I think you have those in your handouts. So I have a lot of different titles, as you can see up on the slide, but today, really, I'm pleased to provide an update as the Deputy Director regarding the newest National Cancer Institute designated comprehensive cancer center in the United States. So really, again, on behalf of Roy Jensen, he was here earlier, but he had to take a flight to Dallas today. Our director, the Cancer Center leadership, the Cancer Center members, and most importantly, our patients, I'd like to thank you for believing in us, supporting our effort to bring a world-class cancer center to our region. Next slide, please. As most of you are aware, and as Fred just shared today, we obtained our comprehensive designation from the NCI, which was announced officially by Senator Jerry Moran on July 7th in 2020. Comprehensive designation status is the highest recognized award by the NCI and really a gold standard for cancer centers. Then on September 1st, 2022, Governor Laura Kelly issued a proclamation to honor the Cancer Center for earning the highest designation from the NCI. Slide 3, please. Now, this is something I put together so you understand that it's taken us a long road to get to where we are today. The effort to bring a nationally recognized cancer center to Kansas has been a collaborative effort by many, including past and present Kansas legislators, community partners, and local business leaders. The formation of the KU Cancer Center has been a journey for many years, first led by William Jewell. He was an MD and a surgeon at the medical center and the founding director of the Cancer Center, and then Roy Jensen, an MD, clinical pathologist who grew up in Gardner, Kansas, and returned to his home state in 2004 to establish a cancer center in the heartland that would be nationally recognized. Dr. Jensen was recruited from Vanderbilt University School of Medicine and has been the Cancer Center's steward for the past 18 years. For reference, in 2004, there were only 3 KU faculty who had ever been a member of an NCI-designated cancer center, and only a handful of clinical trials available for our patients. We now have over 350 cancer-focused researchers and clinicians, and 34,000 patients have been enrolled on treatment trials through the Cancer Center since 2007. There have been many milestones along the way, which you can see listed up here, each that were critical and essential to the current success of the Cancer Center. Really too many to highlight today. However, I'd like to bring your attention to the critical role of the local and state legislation in this journey. First, in 2007, when the Kansas legislation approved a $5 million appropriation to the Cancer Center. Then in November 2008, when the Johnson County voters approved a 1/8 cent sales tax to help fund the clinical cancer research building in Fairway, Kansas, and our clinical trial staff. Next, funding from the Bioscience Authority, the KBA, provided essential support to remodel outdated research space and to recruit nationally renowned scientists and future members of the Cancer Center leadership. Even though I grew up in Lawrence, Kansas, and graduated from KU, I would never have left my current institute, which is the Fox Chase Cancer Center in Philadelphia, where I was there for 26 years, which is one of the oldest NCI comprehensive designated cancer centers in the country, to come to the medical center if not for the support from the KBA and the resources from being named a KBA Eminent Scholar. Then, as Fred mentioned, in 2020, prior to our application for comprehensive designation, the Kansas legislation approved an additional $5 million appropriation, which allowed for additional growth and recruitment of essential faculty, including Ron Chen, MD, PhD from North Carolina, Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center, another native Kansan, who is now the chair of the Department of Radiation Oncology and the Associate Director for Health Equity. Dr. Chen, along with Hope Crable, led the community outreach and engagement, so the term COE, you might hear occasionally, section of our NCI application, which received the highest possible ranking from the NCI study section and was the major reason for us obtaining comprehensive designation. Next slide, please. The Cancer Center, as Fred mentioned, is a partnership among many, and I'm not going to go into detail since he's done this. But really, each of these individuals brings something special to our Cancer Center. Our consortium partners, as listed here, are the basically Children's Research Institute, the Stowers Research Institute, really have strengthened our Cancer Center. Our affiliation with children strengthened our pediatric cancer treatment and research efforts and reinforced our work in the pediatric genomics and translational research. Next slide, please. The Cancer Center leadership, which is shown here, has grown substantially over the years to address areas of expertise and ever-changing requirements to be named an NCI-designated comprehensive cancer center. The most recent addition is Megha Ramaswamy, a PhD, and she serves as the Associate Director for Cancer Workforce Equity. Next slide, please. Our Cancer Center is located across 4 campuses and 3 institutes, which are shown here. These 4 campuses each bring distinct strength and area of expertise as listed that collectively enhance our capability to conduct transdisciplinary and collaborative research of national significance, which has had profound effects in our catchment area. Next slide, please. So I kind of have to give you a little bit of history. The NCI Cancer Center program was created as part of the National Cancer Act in 1971 and as part of an anchors of the national cancer research efforts. Through this program, the NCI recognizes centers around the country that meet rigorous standards for transdisciplinary, state-of-the-art research focused on developing new and better approaches to prevent, diagnose and treat cancer. There are currently 71 NCI-designated cancer centers, 53 which are comprehensive. These cancer centers are located in 36 states and in the District of Columbia and are funded by the NCI to deliver cutting-edge cancer treatments to patients. NCI designation matters. It's important to our Kansas City community, in the state of Kansas, and western half of Missouri, because that's where the 4.5 million people we serve live. If you're diagnosed with cancer, it means that you'll be treated at one of the top cancer centers in the country. For families and friends, it means your loved ones will be cared for by world-leading cancer care experts with access to a broader portfolio of progressive clinical trials. If you're a civic or a business leader, it means world-class cancer care in your community, a hallmark of all great cities. For the KU Cancer Center, it also means we have access to more research dollars, complementing our ability to grow our team of internationally renowned researchers and physician scientists. Next slide, please. Studies have clearly shown that patients treated in NCI-designated center have a 25% greater chance of survival, and that patients treated at a comprehensive cancer center experience superior survival rates as compared to patients treated at other centers. Why? The world experts in cancer care and research are members of these centers and provide access to the most recent treatments, prevention, screening, supportive and palliative care trials, as well as our ability to study the natural histories of cancer. Next slide, please. Each year, approximately 250,000 patients receive their cancer diagnosis at NCI-designated cancer centers. For reference, in 2023, it was projected that over 1.9 million new cancer cases and 600,000 deaths will occur in the United States. An even larger number of patients are treated for cancer at these centers each year. And thousands of patients are enrolled in cancer clinical trials at NCI-designated cancer centers. Many of the centers also provide public education and outreach programs on cancer prevention screening with special attention to needs of the underserved populations. As indicated, the KU Cancer Center diagnosed approximately 7,200 new patients and supports over 220,000 outpatient clinical visits annually. Next slide, please. Most cancer centers do not have basic and clinical research programs. This is a key differentiator for the KU Cancer Center from other hospitals in our region. We have over 350 researchers and clinicians, many who are nationally and internationally leaders in their respective field. Furthermore, locally, all the cancer treatment centers combined don't come close to the 150-plus disease-specific oncologists at the KU Cancer Center. Next slide, please. Clinical trials offer the standard care plus access to new therapies. We provide patients the opportunity to participate in clinical trials along the entire cancer continuum, and that means from prevention all the way to survivorship. Importantly, we can offer clinical trials only available to NCI cancer centers across the state of Kansas via our Masonic Cancer Alliance partners, as Fred just talked about. In addition, we offer what are referred to as investigator-initiated trials. Those are concepts designed and led by our own physicians. Next slide, please. This is a very important slide, I think, to give you an idea of who the patients are, where we treat, and where they come from. Our catchment area is approximately 4.5 million people spread over 92,000 square miles. This means we have a population half the size of New York City, but in an area 90 times as large. 3/4 of our counties are classified as rural or frontier, and frontier would mean less than 6 people per square mile. And annually, we have over 2,400 cancer cases, resulting in nearly 9,000 cancer deaths. The Cancer Center has embraced these challenges and become a national leader among the NCI-designated cancer centers in rural cancer care and delivery. As I will discuss further, our partnership stretches across Kansas and into western Missouri, as we have worked with the networks of hospitals and healthcare organizations through our outreach arm, as Fred mentioned, the MCA, or the Masonic Cancer Alliance. The MCA members include hospitals, physician groups, research organizations located within our service area. These partners are critical because they provide enhanced access for our communities to cancer screening, increased access to clinical trials, and help improve prevention, including things like HPV vaccination rates from northern Kansas City, Missouri, to Goodland, Kansas. Next slide, please. Our catchment area is more diverse than many people expect, with 10% of our population being Hispanic and 8% of our population being Black or African American. In addition, our population based on, there's different criteria, but we use the rural-urban continuum code, live in rural or frontier communities with significant health disparities. Our top 5 cancers for both incidence and mortality largely follow national trends, which are shown there on the right. While the catchment area is predominantly white, we have communities in rural counties that are major minorities. And you'll also note that our Hispanic population has a higher density in rural communities. Next slide, please. The Cancer Center has been a leader when it comes to serving and understanding the needs of our catchment area. In 2007, we launched what was originally called the Midwest Cancer Alliance, and now referred to as the Masonic Cancer Alliance, to serve the outreach arm of the Cancer Center. This organization was developed to ensure that we are extending the benefits of having a world-class cancer center throughout our catchment area. The MCA, which has been endowed with $5 million from the Kansas Masonic Masons, now consists of 17 member organizations, 17.5 FTUs, and a budget of $2.3 million. At the time, the concept of community outreach engagement was not a requirement of the NCI leadership. But under the direction of Dr. Jensen and Hope Crable, who is the executive director for the MCA has been a crucial organization to serve the needs of our region. 10 years later, that decision proved to be that the establishment of the community outreach and engagement component of the NCI guidelines for comprehensive designation. It's now a requirement, and we were actually 10 years ahead of the curve. We also put in place the Community Advisory Board, which meets 4 times a year and consists of 18 individuals with diverse backgrounds and perspectives as a conduit to learn from people, from the people who we provide care for. We have also developed an organization referred to as Pivot, Patients and Investigators Voices Organized Together, a group of nearly 140 trained patient research partners across the state to empower cancer survivors and patient advocates to improve and impact our research efforts. Next slide, please. As depicted in the next 2 slides, and this really comes as a surprise for many, the University of Kansas has diagnosed and treated patients from 50 states in the United States, in addition to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Next slide. And that extends to patients from 19 countries around the globe. When people see that result, they tend to ask me why. And the reason is in great part, next slide, please, of the efforts of Dr. Joseph McGurk, the Division Director for Hematological Malignancies and Cellular Therapy, and the Medical Director of the Blood and Marrow Transplant Program and his clinical team. Through his program, the KU Cancer Center provided access to patients for the first available CAR T therapy trials in the nation. Being the first not only helped get these new therapies approved by the FDA, but resulted in patients being referred from other comprehensive cancer centers, as well as hospitals around the globe. Next slide, please. As depicted on the right, chimeric antigen receptor T, which is what the term CAR T comes from, therapies are based on genetically modifying or changing a patient's own immune cells to better fight their cancer. Our hematologic malignancies and cellular therapy program was not only one of the world's first providers of the FDA-approved CAR T cell therapy, but is one of only a few cancer centers to offer all current FDA-approved CAR T treatments. Next slide, please. To facilitate, to illustrate how our clinical facilities enhance the depth and breadth of our clinical research program and patient care, I'd like to further highlight our bone marrow transplant, CAR T, and proton therapy efforts. Our bone marrow transplant program is the 10th largest in the country. When you combine marrow and stem cell transplants, the CAR-T program, which treats about 400 patients per year with these modalities. Since our bone marrow transplant program began, we have performed over 4,400 transplants, and the KU health system recently opened a 150,000 square foot heme malignancy inpatient unit. We were the first in the world, as I mentioned, to enroll patients on the Chimera, the CRISPR CAR-T, and the multiple myeloma CAR-T trials. We currently offer all 5 FDA-approved CAR-T treatments and have over 20 active CAR-T clinical trials open that have enrolled 165 patients. We have also begun to develop our own in-house CAR-T constructs for treating glioblastoma, a brain cancer, and acute leukemia. Finally, in May 2022, we opened the Proton Therapy Center. Currently, there are 39 proton therapy centers in the United States. There are currently no centers in Kansas or surrounding states of Iowa, Nebraska, Colorado, and Arkansas. Patients in our region no longer must leave home to receive life-saving care they need. The treatment is particularly important to our pediatric patients, given it will reduce the long-term side effects of radiation at a young age. Next slide. Our impact on the business community has also been substantial, and Fred mentioned this a little bit. From 2007 through 2022, it's projected that the KU Cancer Center contributed $2.3 billion to the region's economy and supported 4,100 jobs through its research activity. Next slide. For the Cancer Center to prosper and grow, we must provide state-of-the-art facilities to attract and retain outstanding scientists and clinicians to provide the best care possible to our patients. The KU Cancer Center currently controls approximately 260,000 square feet of research space and utilizes approximately 475,000 square feet of space for the oncology clinical program in conjunction with the KU health system. This is high-quality space, the vast majority of which has been built or completely renovated within the last 10 to 15 years and spreads over the medical school campus. Due to our rapid growth in the last decade, we are working with the university and the health system to significantly expand space available to cancer programs, and their efforts that are currently focused on Signature Cancer, and our efforts are currently focused on Signature Cancer Center building on the main campus that would be approximately 670,000 square feet and house 90% of our cancer research activities at the medical center, including my Precision Medicine Institute. This building would allow us to relocate and expand the outpatient activities for our heme malignancy and cellular therapy program. We have outlined essential features of the building and are working with the campus leadership and the KU endowment to identify financing and community support. Next slide. To support this effort, Senator Moran included in the 2023 omnibus bill budget 2 earmarks, funding, one to fund to update antiquated equipment, which I will say we've spent already, and then funding for planning and construction of a cancer research facility at the KU Cancer Center. Next slide. Over the next 10 years, the number of cancer cases are predicted to increase by 45 to 50%, which is remarkable, but not in a good way. 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime, and the 5-year survival rates continue to lag. We must continue to do more to achieve our quest to conquer all cancers. Next slide. It is predicted by 2040, the global burden is expected to grow to 27.5 million new cases and 16.3 million cancer deaths annually. Thus, cancer is a pandemic that will require new treatments and, importantly, prevention measures. Next slide. This journey to conquer cancer will continue to take time, resources, creative minds, and a commitment from leaders well beyond our campus borders. It's a multi-year endeavor, a true collective mission, uniting everyone in our community because everyone has been touched by the tragedy of cancer. Our quest will continue to require more resources, and I will emphasize again, the cancer-focused building on the main medical school campus is absolutely essential. Our impact will require new ideas from our next generation of scientists, and the development of novel clinical trials that focus on both treatment and prevention if we are to achieve our goal of conquering all cancers. Last slide. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to take questions along with Fred.
All right, thank you. Committee, I'll make note that we do have written testimony only from Dr. Roy Jensen, Vice Chancellor and Director, University of Kansas Cancer Center. And then I'd also like to recognize Robert McCormick, the Director of Government Relations with UKMC, for helping us put all this together, so we appreciate that. Committee, are there questions for our two presenters? Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for an excellent presentation, Dr. Godwin. We receive a lot of political pushback on vaccinations here in this building, and I'm just wondering if you would comment on the effectiveness of HPV vaccination for our daughters and women. I'm waiting on a prostate vaccine so I can avoid that cancer if there's a viral vector involved, but I wonder if you might comment on that.
So I will say many years ago when it was first introduced, my daughter had just turned the age to be eligible. I think she was first in line to get it because I was so serious about how important this is. Preventing cancers is essential. This is a preventative measure that works quite well, not just in females, it has to be given to males as well to avoid the transmission. The uptake had been a challenge. It was really one of our big efforts that we basically put much resource into working with different groups, including pediatricians and others, to emphasize the importance of HPV vaccinations. If there's a vaccine that actually can prevent cancer and eradicate it, I don't know why we're not doing it, and I understand pushbacks from vaccines from people for many reasons. This is demonstrated to be extraordinarily safe and effective. And like I said, I was so set on the fact that this is such an important preventative measure that my daughter was almost the first person in line in the state to get that vaccine.
Thank you. Follow-up, Madam Chair. You have partners across state line, and I see there's a comprehensive center in St. Louis, which I assume preceded our designation.
Absolutely, yes.
Was there cooperation from the University of Missouri, since they have a medical presence in Kansas City, to create this? I didn't see mention of them at all.
Yeah, and
Thank
so
you.
the way that we really look at what our catchment area ends up being is 18 counties on the western side of Missouri. And it's really based on the referral rates, where we can see patients where they're coming from. And that it's much closer, obviously, in those 18 counties to come to KU than it is to the WashU in St. Louis. Ours was done independently, but again, cancer centers work together. That's the big thing. We have a committee or central meetings that bring all cancer centers directors together and staff together to talk about what works and what doesn't work. So all cancer centers work together, but when we went for our designation, it was really driven by, our efforts within Kansas and the western half of, western 18 counties in Missouri. And it really is just basically focused on, what's going to be best in our area, what can we do to improve the care of the patients in our area, and that's based on referrals. So whether it's in Missouri or in Kansas, we treat everybody who comes to our cancer center. But yes, cancer centers work together, and that's an extraordinarily important thing because I will say, when people learned that we got a perfect score on the COE, they were reaching out to us to ask what was the trick, because we're the only people that did. And I will also say that we've been told that our score from the past time when we had our last renewal of NCI designation to comprehensive designation was the best improvement of any cancer center ever in regards to the score of their application.
Again, congratulations to you and Dr. Jensen, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Committee, further questions? Representative Epley.
This is kind of an easy one, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. I didn't quite understand when the Masonic Alliance, Cancer Alliance got involved. Was that when you were going through the COE process, or were they just a partner to help broaden that, or explain that in a little more depth, please? Thank you.
It became the means for us to be able to be to develop the outreach arm of the Cancer Center. It is absolutely what is now a required element within any application of people going forward. So the MCA, or the Midwest Cancer Alliance, was a brainchild many years ago, and like I indicated, it started in 2007. And it didn't actually become a component of the comprehensive one until basically 2020. So we were way ahead of the curve in regards to building a network throughout the state of Kansas and in some of the areas within western Missouri to partner so that we could actually open clinical trials so that people didn't have to come to Kansas City. They could get care closer to home. So this has really been very important, but it also does a lot in the area of the screening and education. We have recently purchased a van that's going to be able to go to all these different sites to help with on-site screening. We've done that a lot of times, for example, for melanoma. We do lots of education. One of the things I started was the Center for Genetic Services and Health Equity, and that is now benefiting from the MCA, where we're now getting referrals, and this is focused on people of underserved populations, where my last data showed that 55% of the people that we're providing genetic counseling and testing for free through the Center for Genetic Services and Health Equity are uninsured. So there's really an effort for us to be able to do these sorts of outreach efforts within our community and go to where the people are and not expect them to come to us all the time. And I think that's really important. So that idea of having this network spread across the state of Kansas and western Missouri has been essential, and everybody recognizes the value of this. And it really has led us to be a national leader in treating rural populations. And people now come to us, and actually we've been recognized by the NCI for certain trials that have been opened to be the best accrual of any site in the entire United States Cancer Center onto these clinical trials in rural populations. So we've had a focus on that, but that could not have been done without what's now called the Masonic Cancer Alliance.
Well, thank you very much for your report today, Dr. Gooden. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, are there further questions? I want to thank you very much for being here, and I think looking around the room at this committee, I'm the only one that was here when we first started this process, and it's been quite the journey, and it's taken a long time, and it's something for us to definitely be very proud of. So,
Well, I will tell you, I got recruited in 2010 to help write the first application. And there was a lot built in place before I came even, but I saw huge growth since I arrived. And it has been a journey, but we really appreciate the support we've got here in Topeka. It's been essential, let's just say. And so that's why I wanted to give people that idea of that timeline, because it is a long journey, and people think things can happen overnight. And in all honesty, we're one of the very few cancer centers that have got comprehensive designation this quickly.
well, I think that speaks volume for the people that we have on staff, and you're exactly right. I don't think there's a person in this room that cancer hasn't touched in one way or the other. So thank you very much for being here today, and appreciate the presentation.
Thank you very much.
All right, next committee, I have a presentation from the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board, David Fye, Executive Director of the BSRB. Welcome to committee, David.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, I do have a presentation today, so if you have a packet of material, it should be about 30 pages long or so. And before I begin, I just want to let you know, most of this is going to be slides from a presentation. However, the BSRB is a composite board that licenses many different professionals, and we use a lot of different acronyms. So the last 3 pages of your packet, I did include a 1-page summary of some of the acronyms that we use with the BSRB. And then following that, I provided a report that we provide to our board members for every full board meeting that shows a history of our permanent licensees. And that starts back in July of 2015 on that table, and it goes up until January of 2023. And so the first page of that breaks it out by every type of permanent license we issue. And then the second page of that report groups it by professions. So you can see the change in professions over time. So But I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and provide a little information on the BSRB. My name is David Fye. I'm the Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board, and I'm here with the Assistant Director and Licensing Manager, Leslie Allen. But I'll go ahead and go through these presentation slides and give you a little bit of an informational briefing about who we are and how we fit into the bigger picture of the health system in Kansas. Next slide. So our mission as the BSRB is, in accordance with the intent of the Kansas Legislature, is to protect and serve the consumers of services offered by BSRB licensees. And we do that through the issuance of licenses, resolution of complaints, and the creation of appropriate regulations accomplished through efficiency, fairness, and respect to all those involved. And one thing I try to stress to individuals when I'm telling them about our agency is that we are focused primarily on protecting the public. We were created by the legislature as a public protection agency, and so while we do have a lot of interactions with licensees, our primary mission has to be to keep those individuals receiving services in mind first and foremost. Next slide. A little bit of the history of the BSRB. We were created back in 1980. That is when the Kansas Legislature took the existing Board of Psychology examiners and also the social work examiners and combined those two into one combined agency. Next slide. Over the years, the BSRB's jurisdiction has expanded to include the licensure of 5 other professions, including professional counselors, master's level psychologists, marriage and family therapists, addiction counselors, and most recently, behavior analysts. Next slide. We are commonly known as a composite board. That is the term used more often in other states, but what that means is that rather than have a separate board for psychologists, social workers, and each of the other professions, we operate as one board composed of professional members and public members, and this combination of individuals on one board is kind of what I refer to when I say that we are a composite board. Next slide. Some of the benefits of having a composite board is that we are able to save a significant amount on operational expenditures by sharing resources and utilizing licensing and investigative staff, because even though there are uniquenesses based on the professions, there is some similar subject matter. All these professions relate to the fields of mental health, and so we are able to save on operational expenditures by combining all these into one agency. Next slide. One way to distinguish the BSRB from other bodies which focus on these topics is that we are a board compared to an association. And a regulatory board, we exist to protect consumers of services. We were created by the legislature, and we are governed by statutes, regulations, and other policies adopted by the board. Whereas an association may have similar interest at times, but an association exists and sometimes it is primarily focused on enhancing the profession, and it is also created by the profession. Next slide. A little bit about our agency, just to give you an idea of our agency compared to some of the larger health agencies. The BSRB employs 10 staff members, including myself. There's an executive director, assistant director, and licensing manager, licensing specialist, investigators, and then we also employ some clerical employees as well. Next slide. In terms of our operations, we are a fee-funded agency, and when I say that, I mean that we operate based on the fees we collect from individuals that we license. We do not receive any money directly from the State General Fund for operations, and in fact, by statute, regulatory boards such as ourselves contribute 10% of our revenue up to a yearly cap of $100,000, and that goes directly to the State General Fund, and it helps fund state operations. Our agency revenue is from license fees, like I mentioned. Our annual budget is a little over $1 million. And as a small agency, you might understand the BSRB contracts and has agreements with many different agencies. And so we interact with a lot of other groups of government and some that are outside of government to make sure that we have the services we need to provide services to the citizens of Kansas. Next slide. A little bit of information about the board. So the board members are appointed by the governor, and they serve 4-year terms and may be reappointed for one additional second 4-year term. So it allows service on the board for a maximum of 8 consecutive years. Next slide. The board is currently composed of 12 individuals. I mentioned 8 professional members, 4 public members. The 8 professional members are 2 psychologists, 2 social workers, 1 marriage and family therapist, a professional counselor, an addiction counselor, 1 master's level psychologist, and then 4 public members appointed by the governor. Next slide. As you might understand, covering 7 different professions is a lot of different subject matter, and while there might be some similarities at times, it's really important to be able to get input from other individuals on that subject matter. So to assist the work of the board has set up 7 advisory committees. These are groups that meet for 2 hours every other month. They discuss matters referred to them by the board. They make recommendations to the board on possible changes to statutes and regulations for the profession. And on those advisory committees that assist the work of the board, you have 1 board member who is a member of that profession, a public member, and then the remaining members, usually between 5 to 10, are generally licensees in that area in the state of Kansas who have submitted consideration to the board. They have been reviewed by the advisory committee, and then the chair of the board has appointed those individuals to an advisory committee. And just to give you an idea of how many volunteer to serve on our advisory committees, there are 55 individuals who currently volunteer to serve on those advisory committees and provide service to the board and thus to the citizens of Kansas too. Next slide. In terms of the overall function of the agency, there are 2 main functions, licensing of practitioners and then also investigation of complaints or disciplinary actions. Next slide. In terms of the number of licensees that are underneath the BSRB, there are currently almost 15,000 licensees. There are 14,779 as of the last count. Those are made up of those 7 professions that I mentioned earlier, and those are listed below. Next slide. And I mentioned the page of acronyms in the back, so you may want to use that page of acronyms when you look at this page here. But this is the list of all of our permanent licensees based on the different professions. LPs are licensed psychologists. Then you have the 4 social work levels of licensure, professional counseling, behavior analysis, and then on the right you have master's level psychology, the clinical level of master's level psychology, which is called licensed clinical psychotherapist, marriage and family therapists, addiction counselors, and then, like I said, the behavior analyst. 2 areas are on the bottom. Next slide. In terms of what we have done recently, last fiscal year, I had a report run to show how many licensees we provide a permanent license to. And so last fiscal year 22, the BSRB issued 1,536 permanent licenses, 328 temporary licenses, 97 out-of-state temporary permits, and then 4 provisional licenses. Next slide. So of those 1,536 permanent licenses that we issued, I think it's important to understand that about 2/3 or 1,112 are initial licenses, and then about 424 were through reciprocity. And so those initial licenses are usually from individuals who have just graduated or are about to graduate from school, and they are applying to the board. They still need to take a standardized licensing examination and fulfill other requirements, but they are seeking licensure from that path. Reciprocity would be individuals practicing in other states that are either wanting to move to Kansas, or a lot of these areas, individuals provide telehealth to Kansas from other states. So you may have individuals that have no intention to move to Kansas but wish to continue or to start providing services to the citizens of Kansas, and so those would be those reciprocity applicants. Next slide. I mentioned our initial licensure. It's also really important. We oversee renewals of applicants. And so in last year, we processed renewals of 6,214 individuals. And then as part of our license renewal process, we audit 10% of all individuals who apply for licensure or get their license renewed. And then when they are audited, we ensure that they received all of their continuing education hours from the past time period. And so last year we did 625 individual audits of our licensees. Next slide. So since July of 2015, which goes along with the table in the back, the number of permanent licensees has increased by 21.6% from about 12,152 to 14,779. So our number of licensees is growing. The professions with the largest increases over that time span include professional counseling, social work, and then behavior analysis. Next slide. Okay. As far as investigations and discipline, one of our primary focuses is licensure of individuals in these professions, but additionally, we are charged to investigate complaints against practitioners, and we have administrative authority over these individuals. It's important to know this does not take the place of criminal jurisdictions or criminal proceedings, nor of civil proceedings. So occasionally we do get complaints against individuals that may be more of a criminal matter, and so we advise those individuals to consider consulting with law enforcement, or if it seems severe, we consult with law enforcement. And then we do not advise people whether or not to proceed with civil matters, but we are separate from that. Our main jurisdiction involves the person providing services and their license under the board. Next slide. To give you an idea of the work that we do, we have one lead investigator who's a full-time investigator for the board. Another individual serves half of her time as an investigator and then half working on the clinical level of applicants. That's the highest level that those individuals can practice at. Last fiscal year 2022, we received 205 complaints against practitioners. We refer to those also as reports of alleged violation. And so those RAVs are important, and we distinguish it that way because there may be individuals who are unhappy with the service that they are being provided. However, it has to tie into a violation of the statute or regulation. And then for comparison in terms of those complaints against practitioners, in fiscal year 2021, we received 132. And then in fiscal year 2020, we received 199, and then we received 201 in 2019. And you may be asking, why did that number drop so significantly in 2021? I can't give you a solid reason for that decrease, except to say that in talking with other states, they also similarly saw a decrease, and that was during some of the heavy periods of the pandemic. And I think maybe some of that was related to people either not receiving as many services because they were moving to telehealth or not receiving services the traditional way. I have also heard reports from some individuals who said it was a very difficult time. We weren't sure what the standard was to expect, and so we were happy to receive any services. And so those could have been factors that played into that. But I do believe that traditional number of 200 is probably where we will be continuing. So far this fiscal year, prorated, we were about on that pace as well, if not a little higher. So I think that number is probably not going to be bouncing back and forth like it did that one year. Next slide. A little bit more about our investigative process. So when we receive a complaint against a practitioner, they are reviewed to assure that we have jurisdiction over those individuals. And then we also look to see whether the matter itself involves a potential violation of the statutes and regulations for the profession. Some of the reasons we may not have jurisdiction, there is a little bit of confusion between psychologist versus psychiatrist, and psychiatrists would have to have a medical degree, and those are overseen by the Board of Healing Arts. So if there are referrals that we can go ahead and send to another agency, sometimes we go ahead and do that and inform the person that we don't have jurisdiction over that practitioner. Additionally, there are times when some individuals submit a complaint about someone who may be practicing in Kansas City, Missouri, and they believe that they are someone licensed in Kansas, but they're actually licensed in a bordering state. And so some individuals may be a little confused about who we have jurisdiction over because of that reason too. But they are reviewed by a subset of the board, the Complaint Review Committee. Next slide. Some of the example of some of our common violations we do find is we do see some individuals falsify continuing education requirements, and that would be an audit violation. They have to have all their continuing education hours done by the time they renew, and so if we find a violation there, that is one of those violations that does come up. Additionally, some individuals practice without a license or practice with an expired license, and sometimes that can be a very short period of time where someone just accidentally misses their deadline, or there could be individuals who just fail to renew. And then sometimes there are cases where individuals never go through that licensure process. There could also be dual relationships, which is include when you have a practitioner who is providing services to a client but also fulfills another role that would be inappropriate for them to do. There can be conflicts of interest. Additionally, making sexual advances towards or engaging in physical intimacies with any client is something we see from time to time. A practitioner refusing to report a termination or suspension, confidentiality violations, and then practice issues, performing services inconsistent with one's education or accepted professional standards. Next slide. One of the different things that we do in the office as well, aside from our main licensing role and our role to make sure that we are investigating complaints against practitioners, is we provide a certain amount of outreach. The assistant director and I, we speak to groups of students that are getting close to graduating, and we inform them of some of the ways that they can avoid issues when they apply for licensure. And then we also make them aware of the standards in terms of disciplinary conduct so that they can avoid having issues in that area when they apply for licensure. Last fiscal year, we gave 18 presentations to groups of students, and that combines presentations in the fall and also in the spring as well. And then one item that we're a little unique in this, but I think it's important to share in terms of outreach. So during the pandemic, a lot of our meetings were not being able to be held in person. And so as a way to provide a more secure way for members of the public to be able to receive information from our meetings, both the board meetings and the advisory committee meetings, we launched a YouTube channel. And we broadcast all of our board meetings and advisory committee meetings through that channel. And since that time, we have broadcast 97 board meetings or advisory committee meetings, and they have been viewed over 3,000 times. And I provided a link there if anyone wants to see that information. But one time, when we go to groups of students, one thing that we stress for them is when you're going to become a professional in this area, it's important for you to know the conversations that are taking place. And we want you to be informed so that you can avoid issues. And so we recommend that they go ahead and view some of those meetings so that they can know about upcoming changes, know what their responsibilities are, and just to be more aware of the work of the board and the advisory committees. Next slide. Additionally, we make them aware of resources on our website. And on our website, you can see there a ribbon with different items, but it is at ks.gov. And on the next slide, some of the features we have on our website for practitioners and also members of the public. We have a portal so individuals can renew their licenses electronically. We also provide copies of forms and other applicant materials. Copies of statutes and regulations. Any proposed changes to statutes or regulations are posted. We also post information about complaints and reports of alleged violations, so individuals can pull down those forms to submit those. When there are disciplinary violations involving practice, those are posted on the board's website as well. So as a public protection item, people can see what their violations have been. And then we also post information about board and advisory committee meetings. And so we broadcast those meetings, but we also post handouts and materials so individuals from the public can see what the meetings existed, what happened at the meetings, and they can review the information the board reviewed at those meetings as well. And then before we kind of start to wrap up this presentation, I just want to make you aware of a couple other items concerning the future of the BSRB. And you can go to the next slide. So this year, we have been working on a bill draft of items that the board has recommended changes to statutes. We are also pursuing changes to regulations. A lot of the work that the board has been doing has been talking about workforce issues and has been keeping in mind availability of practitioners. And on a national level, I have been able to attend conferences through many of the associations that assist the boards in other jurisdictions. And I've been asked to speak at 3 different conferences last year about innovative licensing techniques. And one thing the board is really working on that I'm really proud of bringing forward is that our board has had a lot of conversations about how to assist with workforce in a licensing manner. And one of the ways that people focus on this topic is to look at licensees when they are approaching the board first. And that's a really important thing to look at, but it's not the entire picture. I like to think of licensing as an equation. You have individuals who are seeking to get licensed for the first time, but then you also have the individuals who are currently licensed. And then there's individuals who were previously licensed, but for one reason or another, their licenses have expired. And so what I've done in terms of working with the board has been to encourage us to look at all 3 parts of that equation. And so between our statutory recommended changes and our regulatory changes, we are introducing some different measures to assist with individuals, making it easier for them to become licensed, but also allowing those individuals who are currently licensed some paths to be able to renew their license and request more time if they're short of their continuing education hours, so that way they don't have to let their licenses lapse. And then also, we are putting in some incentives to help bring people back. If their license has expired, we are trying to assist them with the cost of that license when they come back, and also the continuing education hours they currently have to get before they come back. And so one of the items we are going to be requesting is a new creation of a type of temporary license, which would allow them to work for a few months while taking those continuing education hours. So I want to make you aware of those things, and I'll be hopefully coming back before you later this session to talk about more of the items in the bill, but I want you to be aware of that. And then I guess I'll go ahead and wrap up my presentation. There's some information there. If you would like to contact me about anything that I talked about, feel free to reach out to me. Our website is another great resource for information. But with that, I'll go ahead and end my presentation, and I can stand for any questions on the BSRB.
Thank you very much, David. Questions for David? Dr. Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Fye, thank you again for taking my call last week. Who's certifying schools from which these individuals come to you? I mean, some maybe aren't, so, and that's not the fault, maybe the students. So how do you handle, schools in the process, schools not certified, et cetera? Thank you.
Sure. So it's a little different for each of the professions. For most of the professions that we oversee, there is a national accrediting body that is recognized by most states. And so our traditional pathway to licensure is if someone has received the appropriate education from a program that is accredited by the national accrediting body, then that really expedites their pathway to licensure. If they came from a program that is not accredited by a national accrediting body, our regulations do allow for some alternative pathway to reach licensure, but there are different requirements in that regulation. And so those are the two main ways that individuals can become licensed. But in terms of a national accrediting body, master's level psychology, for example, is not licensed in every state. I believe there's only about 17 states that license master's level psychologists, so there's really not a nationally recognized accrediting body. But the American Psychological Association, the APA, is working on standards right now. They hope to have those either at the end of this year or maybe next year, at least for comment. And so they're hoping to provide some standards to make that more uniform. Additionally, the board has been discussing perhaps recognizing a national accrediting body for the addiction counseling profession. There's really not a addiction counseling is licensed differently in multiple states, but Kansas currently does not recognize an accrediting body for addiction counseling, and so we're looking at that too, which would help expedite some of those cases. And when I say accreditation too, there is regional accreditation, which is done within the state, which allows those facilities to operate. But there are also national accrediting bodies which look at the coursework, look at the specific requirements from those schools. And then those national accrediting bodies really is the standard in almost all states in terms of, did you go to a program accredited by, for example, for social work, the Council for Social Work Education. And so if CSWE has accredited a program, most states recognize that as having met certain requirements for licensure so they can expedite those candidates.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Blex.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. When one of your licensees has a complaint and you investigate it and go through the process, and assuming they're, at least you find them guilty, what is the process for, is there an appeal process for that individual, or are they appeal right back to the very same people that found them guilty?
That's a very good question. So if we receive a complaint against a practitioner, we first do the review to make sure we have jurisdiction over that person. And then if we do have jurisdiction, our investigators look into it. They reach out to the licensee to get information. And then if they can get enough information to move forward for the Complaint Review Committee to review that, then they review those materials, and then they have a closed meeting under the Kansas Administrative Procedures Act, and they determine if there has been a violation. And if they believe there has been a violation, they discuss the appropriate remedy, and we have legal counsel who attends those meetings as well. And so if they determine that a violation has occurred, they determine the appropriate remedy, then that order is drafted, and then it is sent out to the person, and they have a certain amount of time to appeal that decision. And if they do decide that they would like a hearing and they request an appeal, then that case goes to the Office of Administrative Hearings. And so OAH would be the body that would oversee those requests for appeals on that.
One more, Madam Chair. Thank you for that. If, in case there is a fine or a disciplinary action, does that money that's received from fine, does that go into education and/or training, or is that just going to the general fund of your operation?
So if we receive any kind of penalties or fines like that, and those go back to the state general fund. So they don't go to our, we are a small agency, so we only have one operating fund. But any kind of fines or penalties, those would go back to the state general fund. So we would not be able to use that for operations.
Thank you. Are those credited that $1 million you are required to pay back to the state? Did I catch that right? You said you paid back about $1 million to the state general fund. Is that correct?
So by statute, 10% of all revenue we receive goes to the state general fund. But the fines and penalties really wouldn't be considered traditional revenues like that. So they would just be directly sent to the state general fund. But the $100,000, that would be our contribution to the state general fund by statute.
Okay, thank you for that.
Committee, are there further questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you, David. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, committee, that wraps up what we have today, and I believe we're on for 1:30 tomorrow afternoon, so we're adjourned till 1:30 tomorrow.